Welcome back, everyone. For our next panel, we're going to widen up the scope to look at the rest of the access to law movement, a movement that goes back plus or minus 30 years. And a movement that asks a question, which is, what is the path going to be from here to where all of the law is available to everyone? We now can do that for free. There's no sort of the costs of copying paper and moving them around reason anymore, that only a good law firm can have a full law library, only the best university or the biggest university in the world can have a full library. We can't use that kind of cost as an excuse anymore. So why isn't there that one website where I can go to see every law that applies to me today as I stand on this stage? And if we imagine being in that future time where we got there, what did we have to do? What strategies were tried? What was hard about it? How do we solve those problems? We have some expert folks here on the stage to help us with that. So Angela Jaffee, who worked in the US courts, including working on integrating our own PERMA service with the US courts, which I was happy to hear about, and now works for vLex, which merged with Fastcase in the United States, who can give us both some court administration perspective and some commercial perspective. We have Sara Frug, who directs the library, excuse me, the Legal Information Institute. I have too many L's. And the LII has been at the forefront of this conversation since the early 90s and is such a key perspective on how this has worked. And then Mike Lissner, the founder of the Free Law Project, our co-founder, who is at the cutting edge of how can we take everything that is available online now and put it in a place where people can really find it and use it. So really happy to have all these perspectives here today. Angela, I'd love to start with you as a law librarian. Imagine I come to you today and I say, hey, I want to do the law, I want to be informed, but I don't have any access to commercial databases. I can't afford that. How do I answer legal questions today? What's the landscape for what's there and what's not, and what's hard about that problem?
Is your person an attorney or somebody who's just?
A good question. Let's say I have some legal knowledge, but I don't have any ability to sign into an account that requires a credit card.
Right. So the law is just very fragmented right now in terms of how we're looking.
Can you move that just?
So the law is fragmented right now. You have to search across a number of different sources, depending upon whether or not you're looking for federal law, if you're looking for state law, whether or not you even know the difference between the two, which one would be applicable for you. There are, just a myriad of sources that you're going to have to try to look at. The other thing is that the sources are non-standardized, so they have different collections of information. There's no cross-referencing or linking, so you don't even know if you have everything. You are not sure whether or not your case law or your statute or your reg is still good law. In terms of like public access, the searching tends to be more simplistic. You're searching usually with a case title or a name, a date, just very fielded types of searches, and not very robust search engines like you think of that you get from some of the private sources. And so frankly, it just makes it very, very difficult, to access. And my perspective on it, and I think this is where you're going with all of this wonderful project, is that where we need to be is we need to actually be thinking about the access to justice. It's not enough to just put the information up on the web in some format and not think about who's going to be using it and think about what they're going to be using it for, which is to answer legal questions.
That's a perfect start. So if you imagine being that person who says, hey, I really need to know the law, what do I do? Oh, you're an expert law librarian, walk me through it. And you're kind of like, well, there's 15 websites. You should probably know about all of them. None of them interlink. They all have different interfaces. I think you'd have to say you're not in a position where you're on equal terms. If you can't afford to buy the law, you are not on equal standing. And to be sure, you should have a lawyer anyway, but we sure are not making it easy for you.
Right, absolutely not. It's not easy. It's funny, on the way here, I had these two interactions with people One was in the Uber Lyft driver that I was chatting with while we were driving, and he was telling me about some of the difficult customers that he had, and he said when I have those interactions, he's like, I know exactly what to do. I know my rights. I mean, it was just really striking, and so he went on to tell me that he knows that all he has to do is pull over, contact the authorities. They're going to tell the person they have to get out of the vehicle, or they're going to call the police, and the police will remove them from the vehicle. And it was amazing because he said to me, he's like, I read all of the terms and conditions on every single agreement, and I just thought, wow, first of all, most of us don't do that, but he was so confident because he knew his rights. And it was just so striking, and this was just yesterday. And another person I was sitting next to on the airplane, she was telling me about what she does, and she works for this international agency, and she said that she has a lot of difficulty finding the information that she needs. She's looking for she's looking for information about federal visas, and she's looking for state information, county information, specifically on what schools can and cannot do. And she's somebody who's an expert in the sense that this is something she's done for a long time. She knows how to look for the law. She knows the states that she's covering. And even she said that she had difficulty finding the information that she needed because it's posted in a non-standard way, if it's posted at all.
Perfect. Thank you for stating that so clearly. Sara, let's bring you into the story here. So, for starters, can you just tell us about the LII and sort of when it was founded, and what was the vision when it was founded? Now that we're taking us back sort of to the start of this effort to say, let's try to make it so that everyone can find the things they need when they need them.
Sure thing. I need to turn this on. All right, better. Thanks. At the time that LII was founded in 1992, vision is a really tricky question because retroactively there are so many big principles that it embodied. My perspective is that at the time, what was in mind was that legal education could benefit from making use of technology. And so there was a specific set of hypertext initiatives that had been experimented with and developed, and that the technology of the World Wide Web offered the opportunity to make manifest for the public in a way that had never been possible before.
So this almost sounds like where I know my lab stands right now in relation to AI and machine learning, which is, this is clearly relevant somehow. Let's do some things, let's get them out there, let's start to learn from them. But we don't know the principles yet. And then those principles emerged over time. What do you have in mind? What are the principles that emerged between 1992 and now?
Certainly, and some of it is along the lines of what you have been talking about in your various introductions, that information and knowledge is empowering to people. And this turned out to be something that I think was realized in a slightly broader way at LII, just because there was this relentless experimentation of trying something out, putting something on the web, identifying some gap, seeing how the audience reacted to it, and then realizing that the context was bigger than anybody could possibly have imagined. And so whereas the first set of resources were ideas and documents that were designed for legal instruction, very quickly it became apparent that people all over the world had uses for this legal information that no one could have envisioned in advance.
So how did that change the strategy? What did LII have to do to kind of grow into that new demand?
That's a great question. And the first piece of it is just to start to realize that the Legal Information Institute was part of an information ecosystem. So at the time when it was founded, there were many initiatives that involved making use of electronic technologies like bulletin board systems and even email and all sorts of other technologies. And there were operations that were doing bits and pieces of the work that LII thought it could organize and put an explanatory layer on top of to help gain some leverage on the efforts of all of the individuals and groups and organizations that were involved. And then beyond that, the idea of responding to the audience involved refining a view of the audience being not just law students, nor lawyers, nor judges, but the public at large, and aiming for a segment of the public that was using legal information for work so that it would be possible to provide clear enough explanations that civics students in middle school could still understand it, but the information would be usable by people with advanced legal training as well.
So two themes I'll draw out there. One is that before, when it wasn't possible to make law widely available to everyone, it just cost too much to run a library. We maybe didn't realize how much the law was needed by everyone. But once it started to be possible to find it, you start to see, oh, this really could change people's lives if it was out there. And the other piece is realizing that the task is bigger than we thought it was. This is not one thing. It's not one thing to digitize. It is a lot of different complicated interacting systems. One thing that I'd love to do for this audience, because I know some of you were there the whole time, or were there in 1992 saying, boy, this is going to take us another 10 years. I can't believe how far away we are. Some of you may be encountering this field of activism for the first time and trying to understand what is it that access to law means. So, Sara, the other thing that I'd love if you can put on the table from your perspective at LII is, what are like some of the big swings that were taken along the way, where you might have said like, oh, this is like the thing that might get us to access to law. And I'm not just thinking of LII, but if you were trying to introduce someone to the access to law movement, if you said, well, there was so-and-so who took the first step, and then there was so-and-so who did the next one, what's your like very high level timeline of this field of advocacy?
Sure. I think that one way to look at it is to cast our minds back more than 200 years before the beginning of the big period of productivity of access to law organizations at the beginnings of the United States, and the vision that the predecessor to the Federal Depository Library program entailed, which involved understanding that providing access to government information was an obligation of government, but that obligation would not be satisfied by having a single library where a citizen could walk up and request access and be given access. Rather, the information had to go to the public where the public was. And so fast forward, we have in the history of the free access to law movement and all of the open access to legal information initiatives that never formally joined the free access to law movement organization. What we see is early on, many operations, including the predecessor, Carl Malamud is in the room, predecessor to public.resource.org and then public.resource.org, and other organizations taking steps along the way to digitize information, to work within government or as a nonprofit or as a startup company or within a commercial publisher to offer legal documents to the public. And along the line in that history, there are many, many points at which there are organizations that are started by individuals who had some information need, who took it upon themselves to not only satisfy their own information need, but then to offer the fruits of their improvements to the public.
Thank you. And it seems to me that if I was just thinking about all the different things that were tried over the years, that there were the nonprofit initiatives that were started by larger groups, the ones, as you mentioned, that are an individual saying, I'm just going to do this, which Mike will get to you in a moment. Some of the ones that, Angela, you don't have to speak for, but you can loosely represent on stage. So the question of how can government itself be involved in publishing things, and then the question of is it possible for industry to step in and do it? I'm not sure, Angela or Sara, tell me about what was the expectation and the reality of government's role in this? To say like, well, there are laws, the government has a website, doesn't just the government put them all on the website? And what came of that idea so far?
I'll say that the government as a monolith, I think, is not really a way that I think about it. Mm-hmm. What I see are initiatives in different areas of government to provide information to the public in whatever way was possible. And some of these were very small-scale experimental initiatives. The United States Code was offered online based on using hosting software that was provided by a commercial entity and made available to the public as an experimental demonstration project at the outset before it moved back into the government wholly. There are other initiatives coming out of the regulatory space that involved individual agencies or even programs within agencies thinking about how the regulations were published and what information needs were out there that could be better satisfied by using a different approach to making those available. There has been a wide variety of approaches to making case law available. Mm-hmm. The United States Supreme Court has been off on its own in many regards and has in recent years been pushing the ball forward on that very aggressively. And so there is just a wide variety of approaches even within government. And Angela, I'm sure you have far more experience from Pager.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, that's what I was getting at in terms of why it's so difficult for the public to access, because there are all of these different places, agencies that you have to know what you're looking for to be able to find it. It's also, I think of it now, and I hadn't thought about it before, but I think now because there are so many, I mean, it's great that we have agencies and courts and private industry, and we have nonprofits all publishing information on the web. But now it's harder to find what you're looking for in a way, because you have to search across all of these different collections, each with their own niche, right? Some small, some broader. But if you're not sure what you're looking for, you don't know which sites are the reputable ones. You don't know which sites even have the content that you need. It's very complicated now. I mean, it's wonderful because we have so much more access and so much more information posted and published on the web, but it's, the flip side is it's also more complicated too. And I don't know if you thought about that as well.
I think this is a perfect setup to bring Mike into the room. And let's pause, by the way, to feel some empathy for the many government agencies who have had to try to solve this problem piecemeal with the technology they have and the money they have and the best effort they could put together, and leaving us with, well, many different things in many different places that have patchwork coverage of things. Mike, that might be what was on your mind when you started thinking about the Free Law Project, which started around the same time as the Caselaw Access Project. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it is interesting. All these themes we're talking about here, like even the talking to your Uber driver part, like I have that in my own mind because I had a talking to an Uber driver where he told me about his legal issues as soon as he learned I had anything to do with the law, despite my not being a lawyer. And I think that gets at this question earlier also around access and like access for whom, right? Who are we talking about? And I had it on my list too. Like the first thing you got to do is figure out what the tools are. Okay, great. Now you got to figure out which ones are any good, right? And you got to figure out what they have and what they don't. And it's a good problem, right? Like it's an embarrassment of riches. You have a lot of good tools, and we're having this flourishing right now of tools, which I think 10 years ago we didn't have in the same way. But I think to get like more directly at your question, Jack, like we had going into this, in 2009, I came at it from sort of like the open culture world, and open source software development kind of stuff, and I was in the Open Culture Club at Berkeley, and it was very much, I learned, oh hey, like here's a part of the world that's really not that open. I discovered some of Carl's work, started pulling that and saying, okay, let's start putting stuff together, and it was this like build it and they will come kind of mentality, right? And we didn't have a big like theory of change at the time. It was very much like, let's just put it online. Let's start there. Here's a useful tool, and we made it, right? And it's kind of built on that since then, where it's like, okay, here's the first, open API for case law. Cool, right? Let's see if anybody uses it, and build and build and build. And we've sort of evolved now to where we're at a place where our theory of change is that we're going to focus on data and also focus on information. So data is great, but you need to take it a step farther and make it informative, right?
And just before you get to information, I want to help people understand how much work you've had to do just to get to data. I think the first time that I met you at a panel we were both on, you had just completed your scrapers for all 50 states. And I don't know if that was even it or more than 50 states. But the part of what you had to do was state by state, site by site, write custom computer code that would track everything that any court was publishing. And as a fellow programmer, I was like, wow, you wrote, you did that. You had to get in there and write a common interface across all of the law that was being published in all of those places, just to start to have that data layer available.
Right. And if anyone's from Missouri or Mississippi, you guys are in trouble today. I'd love to talk to you, because the scrapers, we've maintained them since that first time we met, and those two states right now are blocking us, right? So like these challenges persist. And it's just like, it's funny being here today, thinking, like reflecting back, I don't think most people know this. Carl's data, when we first got it, needed normalization. I made 100,000 corrections, by hand myself, right?
You made 100,000 corrections by hand?
Corrections and tweaks and additions, right? It was like every time I was on the subway, I'd open my laptop and go through a couple hundred, right? And that, and it's this sort of like passion.
1,000 subway rides later, you were, yeah.
Right, yeah, and like, and I think you really get a sense of what a million records means. And I think, like, I say this to my friends all the time, nobody knows what a million is until you've done something in this context of big data. And like 7 million cases you guys got done, it's incredible, right? And so the build it and they come really has evolved now into this like build an ecosystem. And that is proving to be very successful, where you gather the data, you curate the data, you work on the data, and then other players can come and do that, making useful tools out of the data, making it informative, making it useful. Because one organization's never going to accomplish that, right? And so that's kind of where we're at now.
Can you help us understand how the nonprofit approach to being that data hub is working? Because I think when I imagine how did we solve this in the future, one option is, well, the right civil society organizations emerged, the right combination of nonprofits and mutual support networks emerged, so that we could build a layer, with minimal help from the government. The documents were there somewhere in some format. Thank you for getting them there. And then this layer kind of gelled into something long-term and durable. But I also imagine that being a difficult or intimidating or unsustainable even process. So how do you think about trying to solve this from the role of being a scrappy nonprofit?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And we have free in our name, so that makes things even trickier, right? Like, and we do get pushback, and we try and walk this sort of narrow path between like, we do need money to do things, but also we want to give away everything for free. And at the same time, like we've tried going to, getting big grants and things like that, and it's hard. Funders don't necessarily get it, and that's really tough. We had one funder tell us gathering all the case law was impossible, and they turned us away.
It is impossible. I think we proved it.
And so we found this place where I think most people are comfortable, where we can charge people with money for access, and also just have sort of a very flexible, open, cheap, free territory. Where like if a student comes up, great, cool, take it, right? A journalist comes up, are they the New York Times? Yes or no? If they are, maybe some money. If they're not, take it, right? And it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but like journalists have never paid, because it's not in their mentality, right? They want the data, they don't have the funding for that one article, right? So we walk this narrow path, and it is working, right? because there is money in this space when you think about it. There are law firms, there are legal needs, right? There are startups, and there is space to make it work.
I think of it as having really a collective action problem, that anyone looks at this and says, wow, there's a lot of valuable stuff that we would all benefit from having out there, but if I have to pay for it, how is that going to work? Angela, I know that's something that was always a challenge for Fastcase talking to Ed Walters. In many ways, he said, okay, I'll step and pay for it, but like, no one joined me. I stepped forward, no one else stepped forward, what do I do next? So it may be a familiar problem from the industry side as well. How do we chip in on a problem that requires collective action? As a teaser for the talk next, one way that people solve that is with government. So I don't know. Let's see if that's a good answer. But I'd love to turn the conversation here for our last 10 minutes into trying to imagine what does work and trying to put as many ideas on the table as we can for what works to make this problem better solved, make it easier to solve, make it more sustainable, make it more complete, make it more useful to people. If you imagine your utopia of access to law, well, what is that utopia and how do we get there? And I'll open that one up to everyone. Does anyone have a burning answer to what is the utopia we're aiming for, and what's an idea you can imagine that might move us closer?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I'm very excited about generative AI. This age of AI and technology, I just feel like we're going to be able to do things that we have not been able to do in the past. These large data sets of information. So, I mean, I think that, when I think of the ideal, we would be able to have public access that would have some of the, really, my goal would be to have, as many of the robust search functionality that you have in the commercial side, that all of the law would be coordinated, that you could find, everything in one place, run a search, and be able to get your answers. I mean, if we think about our public, we have so many people that are unrepresented litigants. I think it's roughly 77 to 86%, depending upon the source that you look at. And there's just a real need for information. And now with technology, we can reimagine it. We can, combine data sets in a way that we couldn't do it before and make it usable. The way, the place that we're in right now is a place that, we couldn't even imagine 10 years ago. So, all of these different data sets that we have now would be able to be searched and mined in a new way, so that the members of the public could find all of the information, easily.
Well, that's a vision I can believe in. Sara, if you imagine that we achieved either that or even a better vision that you have, what specifically happened to get us there? What did this community do that made it possible to be in that utopian place?
I would say that I think that the community would have continued to combine collaboration with infrastructure building. And I think that it so far has taken organizations across all sectors. So commercial entities, whether startup companies or longstanding entities, and the government or many governments and nonprofits, educational institutions, including higher education. And I think if you look at all of the advancement, LAI has often quipped that we're pretty sure the government is going to put us out of business, and that's a good thing. And if you look at all of the advancement in government information, the GPO now has a ISO-certified trustworthy digital repository. That work in government is being taken out to the states by nonprofit organizations like the Beck Center. And I think that if we continue to preserve creative space for that kind of collaboration and advancement, we will get there.
Yeah.
Making a space where the underlying substrate of primary information is available from the government, and everyone who wants to makes it better.
I love that vision where we distinguish, this is the substrate that belongs to all of us, that's available to everyone. And then this is the place where everyone builds on top. And here you have industry with layers that are helpful and you have civil society and nonprofits with layers that are helpful. I really believe in that part of the utopia too. Sara, if I pushed you to say something that would have been surprising in 1992, I think what LAI would have said, we're going to need a collaboration across industry and government and nonprofit spaces to make this possible. We would have known that then. But what do we know today in 2024 when we take our next swing at this that we might not have known the first time through?
I don't think that we would have been able to predict back then just how the interaction between emerging technologies and the availability of primary data would emerge. And so I think that the government has provided far more data than we ever could have known, and the Caselaw Access Project, congratulations, has concluded and opened all of its data.
I said we were done with celebrating.
All right. I can't resist.
Not today, Jack. Today.
And moving forward, what we have is a situation where all of a sudden we have the cost of quality assurance going to next to zero from where it was even a few years ago. And at the same time, we have big technology companies training the public to be open-minded and tolerant of experimental work and features and answers that may or may not be correct because they were produced by artificial intelligence and haven't yet been reviewed. And so casting back to 1992, I'm not sure that we would have fully envisioned that moment yet, and I think that is a springboard that we are very excited to move forward from.
I love that answer. This is a moment, again, where we can say there's a new capacity, new capability that we don't yet know the impacts of, but that we know we can do a lot with, and that we have to figure out what that means. Mike, how about you? Have we described the full utopia yet? Is there more to it? And how do we get there?
I mean, the thing I keep thinking about is culture shift. And, like 98% of cases are in the state courts. And when you go and you try and get that content, it's really hard. And when you try and build, say how important that content is and why it would be useful for things like generative AI, a lot of people don't get it. And I think, like that's the challenge, one of the big challenges I see in front of us. I also think we need to do more work on the advocacy side, like pushing government to do better. I don't know of a lot of lobbyists that are working on like policy with the judiciary. We work on like opening up PACER and things like that, or neutral citations. Where's the lobbyist picking up the phone and saying like, hey, whatever state, do the neutral citations. Like, I know you guys worked on it, right? But it's hard because you have to teach why it's important. You have to teach why identifiers matter. And this is like in the weeds. I probably already lost like a large percentage of this room, right?
Yeah, not a good sign.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like we need these things to become normal and expected. And the default for courts to be like, oh, shoot, like, we made some great judgments today. We really doled out the justice. That's half of our job. We need to publicize that. We need to get that to the public. And a lot of courts do not think that way. So that's the challenge, I think, before us. And that doesn't answer your utopia question, but.
No, but it does say, your answer would be if we do get to the utopia, the way we got there is that there was a durable and effective public advocacy aspect to this, alongside the writing code and alongside the kind of the practical work. There was something that helped to explain to government and the public why this matters, and that I think of that as in some ways harder to sustain than the work of sustaining a database. But we found a way to do that. It's part of the work as well.
I guess if I would add one more thing on top of that I didn't really mention, but that came up earlier, is this like the access to justice component. And like talk about hard challenges. We need to learn how to take care of each other more in this country. And like we can build tools till we're blue in the face, but and this is off topic maybe, but we need more people helping people.
Yes.
So
well,
that gets back at the culture change also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's not off topic, but the perfect setup for the third portion of our program, which is about why do we do this stuff? Why do we put it out there? And it's not just so that I can have 7 million XML files on my computer. I'm a programmer, and that's my happiest day. But it's not just because of that. It's because we can be people helping people. So I think that's where we're going to go next in our program. Any last call to action for this group, if anyone wants to shout one out?
I mean, I definitely want to say, I mean, I really think that what we need to do is do a complete scan, an environmental scan of all of the different sources of information, of government information in particular, to be able to shine a light on what we do have, but what we're missing. And if we're going to think about, moving forward and being able to kind of bring these data sets, the information together in new ways so that it's searchable and more accessible and freely available for the public, I think that, that's really critical to do that piece first. Then you're able to, look at critically the information that you have and, shine a light and attention to the areas that we're missing, the information that's not available. Because when we, if we're looking at Gen AI or looking at any of these, collaborative sort of research tools, if we have missing pieces of information, that's going to affect the results. So the first thing really is to collaborate and identify what we have and what we don't have.
Well, that's a librarian's answer, that we need an index. But
exactly right.
It's more than that, too, because what it says is, let's honor the shared cultural wealth that we have, the many places that we've come together to create things that matter. When we talk about cases from the 1600s, what we're talking about is an intellectual inheritance and a civic inheritance that we need to build into the future. I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much to our panelists, Angela Jaffee, Sara Frug, Mike Lissner. Thank you for joining us today. Please grab these folks and learn more from them. They are a wealth of knowledge.